Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. I'm your host again, Jay Hersko. Joined with me surprisingly for the first time. All these years we've been doing this is the first time we're actually talking to him. Mr. Evan Leybourn. Evan is the co-founder of the Business Agility Institute, and you are also their head Imaginarian, or what's the second half of that title, Evan?
Advocacy and research.
There we go, advocacy and research. So,
but Imaginarium, I think I'm going to steal that one because I like that one.
I won't even ask for royalties. So what's Evan? What's a nice guy like this doing in a place like here? So I actually connected with Evan through other means, through a different conversation, and I invited him onto the show because I wanted to talk about, there's a lot of gnashing of teeth and rending of gears and rending of hands around the state of the agile world, but a lot of it is anecdotal. And a lot of it is us just speculating and reading tea leaves of what we see on LinkedIn. And a friend of a friend of a friend said this. Evan is a guy who's actually generating some reports. He's actually he's sending out questionnaires, and he understands better than most the arithmetical understanding about what's going on as opposed to the anecdotal. So I wanted to have Evan on to talk about, hey, Evan, from your perspective, where is our world going, right? Because there's a giant, great gnashing of teeth, and everyone is convinced that the sky is falling. And I'm kind of in the middle, where I kind of think this is just the cyclical nature of how things work. But so, Evan, let's start off with, what have you seen? What are you seeing?
I love it. Thank you. So research is fun. It's more than just stats. It's more than just surveys. We do grounded theory. We run interviews. There's a whole bunch of different methods that we use. Recently, end of last year, we published a report which was commissioned by the Scrum Alliance called "The Skills in the New World of Work," where we studied or surveyed 1,000+ individuals in the agile industry. I'll be clear, we are the Business Agility Institute. We often talk about business agility. Agile is an element of it. It is our heritage. But please, just for your listeners, do not conflate business agility and agile. They are separate concepts. But obviously, with the Scrum Alliance, very, very well established in the agile, capital A, agile world, they wanted to understand what was happening, what was new out there, what were companies actually looking for. And we did this study. We looked at a vast number of organizations, a vast number of individuals across any role that you can think of. And broadly speaking, this is a sort of good news, bad news situation. The good news is that Agile has won. Congratulations. So you can start flying the banners and singing the anthems. Agile, when we think of it in terms of the manifesto, when we think of Agile in terms of iterative product development, rapid feedback loops, continuous customer engagement, those elements that make Agile, have been fundamentally established and accepted by the majority, the vast majority of organizations out there. Are they doing it well? That's a different conversation. But are they accepting that this is how product, especially technology product development, should work? Yes, they have. The bad news is that because it has become so common, it has become so ubiquitous in product delivery, the demand for agile specialist roles has dropped. And I'm specifically talking about agile coaches. The demand for roles like Scrum Masters and product owners, those that are more delivery oriented, hasn't. They have changed, as in the expectations and demands of those roles. And we're doing another piece of research on that, which I can talk about later. So whilst that's changed, that hasn't actually dropped that much. In fact, product ownership demand hasn't dropped at all. But the demand for capital T transformation, the investment in let's become agile, has dropped drastically. And organizations have shifted into just assuming or expecting, this is who we are, this is what we should be. And obviously goal mileage may vary. Different organizations are at different stages of this. I'm talking about global trends, but the global trend is that organizations are no longer putting anywhere near anywhere near. We're talking like drops of 80%, 81%, I think precisely, in the level of investments into formal transformation as they were doing pre-pandemic.
So to take it to build on a metaphor, right? It's like if I was learning guitar, right? I buy a guitar, I bring it home, I start messing around, I realize that, hey, you know what? I can get somewhere. And for any of the musicians listening who have self-taught themselves guitar and have turned into virtuosos, I am not talking about you because you truly are the outlier. But a normal run-of-the-mill guy who is not one of the Maroons or not Joe Satriani or Yngwie Malmsteen, right? I'm going to eventually go get a teacher. Right? I'm going to get a guitar teacher. I'm going to take lessons because I want to learn. And eventually I'm going to get to a point where I think I know enough that I don't need the lessons anymore because I've gotten the good the cornerstones, right? The substrate built where, well, now I'm okay to go and give it a shot on my own and see where my knowledge takes me. And from what you just said, I get the sense that the Agile world is taking the same way. So you talked about how Agile has won, right? Jürgen Apollo had a post the other day on LinkedIn where he talked about how Agile really has it's dissolved. To your point in the sense of the things that we think of as good Agile, right? Visualizing work and short feedback loops and limiting dependencies. It's just become standard acceptable practice. This is the way you work in the new world, right? So if I'm soloing like Yngwie, and I'm not an Yngwie fan, so nobody get mad at me. If I'm soloing like him or Joe Satriani, right? I don't necessarily need the teacher around teaching me chord progression and scales. I've transcended that, or at least I've thought I've transcended it. That's the different conversation which we can get to.
I was going to say, so
Yeah.
I think that's your metaphor is very good because I think there are a lot of guitar aficionados and guitarists who have stopped lessons maybe a tad too early.
Very fair. Yes.
But that's the your mileage may vary element of this.
Exactly. And I get where and we're not going to spend the whole conversation looking doom and gloom and okay, so how do we get where we got, right? Because I mean I actually just had a conversation with and I think the episode comes out right after this, Chris Merman with the Agile Alliance, where I said to him, look, man, there is going to come a time for us to take a moment and look backwards and say, hey, what are the sins that created our current situation? How do we prevent that from going forward? But now's not the time. Now's not the time. And I think that as orgs have grown and orgs have matured, like so I don't want to bury the lead, but we're eventually going to talk about like how the role of the Scrum Master is changing, right? Because if we think back to Agile in the way that the book said and all the conversations where your team level coach was your Scrum Master, and yet we had Scrum Masters and we had team level coaches, and never the two shall meet, and we somebody put a rather inflammatory post on LinkedIn, and I hate to keep referencing LinkedIn because it's a cesspool, but someone made the post that, oh, well, Agile coaches are the victim of our own devices because we have too many subpar and substandard coaches out there. I think that's painting with a really broad brush, if I'm going to be honest with you. I've met tons of great coaches. Yeah, I've met a couple of duds, but it's like everything else, right? You go out to eat 50 times in a year at 50 different restaurants, you're going to get a couple of duds. But I think the world is changing. And to your point, yes, Agile has won because what we talk about is just become part of the norm. And I mean, if we had time, Evan, we could go down the rabbit hole of how did retrospect on how Agile has quote unquote won, and yet PMI never went anywhere. They've always been hanging out. And if anything, I picked up the newest version of the PMBOK, and I was actually kind of stunned because it wasn't your mama's PMBOK, right? It looked totally different. It was very much leaning on the modern stuff. I liked it.
PMI was never a movement. Project management was never a movement. It was never a manifesto. It was never a set of values. It was very much a role, a job description, a way of delivering work, and that way. And I've been in the Agile world since 2003. So it's I can remember when project managers were them, not us. But the world moves on, and project management as an institution, as a role, has brought into it all of those elements of agility. They have become us. and some are still them, like, as in it's project management is big enough for all different
Hmm.
shapes. That's the beauty of project management. And I say that as the person who wrote a book called #NoProjects. But the principle is that, yes, projects, the ability to deliver work in a structured manner with some, I'll use the word rigor, right? Whether that is with agility, and structure does not mean not a structure. You can have agility and structure, as in
Yes.
agility requires rigor. Agility requires proficiency and skill. So you can deliver. So, sorry, I'm rambling. When I say structured, I am not suggesting that is somehow anti-agile. It
Right.
can be very much an agile project. And that's the beautiful thing about like project management as a role. Organizations, no matter what shape the work is, work has to be delivered in some form, and project management as a role has done a really good job of saying,
Yeah.
we can deliver value, right? Under what mental model, under what set of values you want to deliver work? Well, that's your choice. That's the company's choice. Is it going to be through an agile mindset, through the values and the principles of the Agile Manifesto, or is it going to be through something more traditional? Right? And I don't want to use the word waterfall because it's not really a thing,
Right.
but a more engineering, linear, stage gated kind of approach. If that's what a company wants, then so be it. That's what a company wants. So it's Agile has always prided itself on being a movement, a mindset, and that in
Hmm.
itself has uh, and that's why I say Agile has won, because it is the movement, is the mindset, not necessarily the practices. As I said, like some people have stopped their guitar lessons a
Yeah.
little bit too early, but the mindset and the values have been well established, commoditized, I would say.
Yes. Yes. Very true. To your point about where PMI and Agile differed, PMI, that I think the big thing for me was it was very much about coherence, not necessarily conformance. And when you look at the Agile world, I mean, no offense, no shade to anybody who was able to create a framework, write a book, whatever, make tons of money. God bless you. God bless you. But then you had second order coaching, second order scrum master, where we were more about the conformance, not that we lost sight of the coherence. And we coached ourselves into, it's like that the old commercial of the guy painting the room and he ends up in the corner sitting there going, well, shit, I'm stuck in the corner because the floor is wet. So what else, Evan? Right? So again, you between your surveys and your questionnaires, you've got a really good read. What else? What else is changing in a way that might actually be a pretty good thing? Do you have any read on some stuff where I view this as a big opportunity, but what without like sharing the secret sauce or anything, like what are some of the things that you're seeing that hey, this could be something positive for the ecosystem as a whole.
So there's a lot that's positive. So inside the capital A Agile industry, roles that are focused on delivery are still highly in demand. The shift is away from hyper specialization. So a dedicated Scrum Master is no longer as desirable as it was a few years ago, but rather a multi-skilled, what we're calling a pie-shaped rather than T-shaped individual. So think about the letter pi, with an individual with two or more primary functional skill sets, right? Scrum Mastery and data, Scrum Mastery and software engineering, Scrum Mastery and coaching. Because one of the things that we've seen, and we haven't published this yet, is coming out in a end of the month, is a supplementary report with the Scrum Alliance on specifically Scrum Master and Product Owner roles. And one of the things that we're finding, and again, research hasn't finished going through peer review yet, so like don't hold me to what I'm about to say. But what
Right,
we're
right.
finding is anecdotally what you just said, that Scrum Masters are picking up the slack where those organizations are no longer running those big agile transformations. They've laid off the coaches, but the work still has to get done.
Right.
They're not finished. And the Scrum Masters are expected, companies are hiring Scrum Masters with coaching skills now. That's one of those secondary or second primary functional skill sets that are expected in these individuals. And when I say like a lot of companies have scaled back or stopped their big T, capital T transformations,
Mhm.
in its place are 100 little t micro transformations, like transformations happening at a business area or a function level, or even just at a team level where teams are trying to get bigger. For those people who are trying to sell training or consulting services, that's difficult because you don't have that central function who is going to buy training for
Right.
100 people at a time. That those days well, I won't say those days are gone, that's hyperbole, but there's certainly less of that.
Yes.
But those little t transformations, though, that continue, and let's call it change, continuous change that's occurring in all of the areas that require it, is something there's a lot of things happening. So in the agile world, the demand for those multidisciplinary agile roles, delivery focused roles, is high, and continues to be fairly strong. Although I will say we've also found that there is a supply and demand mismatch. I'll take
Yeah.
Scrum Masters, for example. We had one of the companies that we interviewed for a single role had over 1,000 applicants. Now that was the outlier. The average is 187 applicants per role, which is still very high. Now, good news is that more than half of them can just get like they're just not suitable for the role for whatever reason. But it still leaves a good 50 odd credible candidates for any given role, which does make anyone who's out there looking for work, if you're a Scrum Master, it is unfortunately a little bit of a numbers game. But if you can highlight those complementary skills that you have, especially those that are relevant to the industry or relevant to the company or the product domain that company is, then you have a much stronger chance, because again, companies are looking for those multidisciplinary individuals. Outside the agile world, huge opportunities. We're doing we have plans for a study that will look at people who were in the agile industry who have since left and taken on other roles and what roles they're taking. Now, we haven't started this yet, but again, more anecdotally, we're looking at people take on roles like delivery manager or head of strategic initiatives, roles that do not have the word agile or coach in their title, but roles that require agility in achieving them. And that's the other thing that we found in the study that we did with the Scrum Alliance, was that the skill of what we're calling agile acumen, the ability to work with agility, is the second highest in demand functional skill set that organizations have in every role. Whether you're an accountant or a marketer, they're expecting you to have a level of agile acumen. And that is something that those people from the agile industry obviously have in abundance.
Right. In
And so
spades.
being able to bring that in. I'm ranting a lot, so let me just very quickly wrap it up. The last thing that I'd mention is, for those, again, we're talking business agility here, there is ongoing demand for individuals who can help organizations think bigger, think better. No, those are the wrong words. It's not bigger or better. It's there is a demand for organizations to be more productive and to be more effective. Those demands have never changed. The focus has definitely shifted into certainly using AI to be more productive and effective. And there is definitely and we're literally launching a research study on the human side of AI in a moment, which sort of takes on in a moment, like next week, which takes on the assumption that if hypothetically AI will help you create value 3 times faster, can your leaders make decisions 3 times faster? Can you get market feedback 3 times faster? Can you get quality control 3 times faster? Can you engage with your customers 3 times faster? And for most organizations, the answer is no.
Right.
So if we're looking at this demand for this ever-present demand for effectiveness and productivity and just better organizations, um, uh, which business agility has always been talking about. If AI is the tool du jour, it's where people's attention are focused, then those of us in that business agility world, there is a demand for how do you unlock that AI? Your AI projects will be successful. You'll deliver the LLM, you'll deliver the models and the tools and the reporting and so forth. But if you're treating it like a glorified RPA, robotic process automation, well, there's a great quote. There's nothing worse than doing efficiently that which should not be done at all.
Yes. Yep.
I want to say Deming.
Yeah, and then
And
Elon Musk butchered it in that one Starship video where he's talking and there's beeping in the background. And yeah, he talked about why optimize something that shouldn't exist. That's a terrible waste. Yeah, yeah.
that's it. But that's my point. It's when we're talking about business agility and the demand that's out there, organizations always have this demand to be more effective, to be more productive, to be more human-centric, to be more an engaged place where employees want to come and work, that customers want to buy those products. And whether AI is or is not where a company is investing their energy, agility has a role to play, and I'm talking business agility here, in unlocking the system that those productivity improvements exist within. I got a bit rambly there towards the end, but I hope
No, no,
that
no,
made
not at
sense.
all. This is good stuff. And these are the best interviews because people are sick of hearing me talk after 8 years. So you bring up an interesting point though about the whole AI revolution where it'll take certain things and make it 3 times faster, right? To your point, what good is me hyper optimizing one section of my quote unquote value stream that is so fast, but the bookends can't keep up. It would be the equivalent of me buying a new car and dumping all my money into tuning the engine, right? I put a supercharger on it and new headers and all this fancy stuff to accelerate and maintain speed, but I don't update the steering to make it stiffer. I don't update the shocks. Most importantly, I don't update the brakes. What am I doing? I'm heading, 900 miles an hour into a wall. So one of the things you brought up, Evan, which I
Not
wanted
to
to
mention, you have these things called speed limits.
right, right. Well, here in New Jersey, taking the Turnpike Parkway, they're kind of negotiable. Although state police would say otherwise. So I wanted to ask you, there's an old saw, right? You've heard this line over and over and over again about the importance of leadership when it comes to working in an agile way. And from my anecdotal conversations, I think we're starting to see leaders who have come up as an agile native in the sense of they never did the whole giant project plan and big upfront design. We're starting to see more and more leaders come out of university, out of school, go into jobs, become managers, become slowly middle managers. That, well, what do you mean? This is just the way we work. It's short chunks of business value to gather quick feedback and all that. Do you see that, Evan? And do you think that maybe is an unlock? Like, will that be something that, well, I just think this way naturally? Like, is that going to be something that could maybe even unlock an even bigger productivity set?
Uh, yes, and it's a very big and. So there are two. I've spoken to quite a number of CEOs, right? Innovative, modern, often young CEOs who are trying to change their organizations, and they complain about being the most powerless people in the organization. And there's this sort of irony. It's like you're the CEO, aren't you the most powerful person? Don't you make all the decisions? And like the reality is no, because the system of the organization, the bureaucracy of the organization has an inertia.
Mm-hmm.
You are entirely correct. As this generational change comes through, these people who don't who've never worked in these sort of big upfront ways of working, they're coming through into environments that's all they
The
know how
norm.
to
Yeah.
do. And so it's again another Deming quote. A good system, or is it Deming? I don't, whoever. A good system will break. Sorry, a good system. A good no, a bad system will break a good leader every time. There we
Yep.
go. I got it right.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure that was Deming. I like Deming. I quote him all the time. My favorite Deming quote, and I'm going to butcher it. If you give someone a measurable target, they will destroy the company in order to achieve it.
Yeah.
I love that quote. It's one of my
Yes. I
favorites.
mean, if you want to get really uncomfortable, we could talk about the upcoming American election and how we have parties set on destroying the country to make their man win, whether suited for role or not. But continue.
Tribalism is fun, whether it's, well, it's horrible and fun, whether it's politics or
Right.
business. But no, it's as an Australian, I have opinions on the American electoral system, but usually best kept to myself.
Welcome.
I have
Join the
discovered,
club.
though, I have discovered that if I get drunk in Texas, I will argue gun control with Texans, which
You are a
apparently
brave
because I have an
man, my
accent, it's
friend.
okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, they're not going to be like, oh, this guy sounds kind of funny. And then they probably said something like, well, I like your accent. Are you Irish? Hey, no offense to our Texan leaders, Texan friends. Shout out to Chris Mervin, Andrew Leff. I love you guys in Texas. Shout out to Heb and Bucky's.
All
But
of them,
anyway,
love them.
leadership.
Sorry, role of leaders. Yes, as this new generational change comes through, we are going to see change occurring, but the larger organizations are going to be the inertia takes time to overcome, and it also takes a deliberate effort to do so. I talk about, with apologies to Eli Goldratt, Evan's theory of agile constraints. An organization can only be as agile as its least agile function, and that's not technology anymore. It doesn't matter if you can do a potentially shippable product increment in 2 weeks, or you've got a DevOps pipeline that can deploy in 11 seconds if it takes you 4 months to get a hiring ticket, or it takes you 9 months to get a budget change approved. Your agility is constrained by, in those cases, your hiring or your HR processes or your finance processes. And there are many, many more besides than those two. So the systems, the bureaucracy create that inertia that's going to impede those leaders who are coming in, trying to bring that change, that mindset in. The second constraint or limitation to this is the education system. I'm talking globally here. MBAs, by and large, still teach. This is hyperbole, so don't quote me specifically, but they still teach 1980s management theory for the most part. The management, they might have an agile module in what is fairly traditional MBA topics. And I'll use finance as an example. There are some really advanced techniques, and I don't mean new or modern. Some of these are 40 years old.
Right. The Deming stuff, the Gold Rat stuff, there's tons. I was just talking to Mike Burrows. We were talking about Mintzberg, throughput accounting, Mintzberg's theory of organizations, right? Carl Weick. There's all that stuff out there that I can't believe I can't find a good MBA course on throughput accounting, but whatever.
And that's it. Yeah. So you do have these leaders who are in this sort of tension between this cultural agility where they're growing up with the internet, they're growing up with this rapidly changing, dynamically changing expectations on them and expectations on the world, and then going into both educational systems that are teaching them 1980s theory, again, hyperbole, or going into organizations that have this bureaucratic inertia that takes time to overcome. So yes, there is generational shift, and there always will be generational shift, but it takes time for that to become established. So don't think it's going to happen next week or next month. The one thing I will add, and I'll go back to AI as an example, and I was talking to Laura Powers, the CEO of the Business Agility Institute, and she said, which I think is such an incredibly insightful comment. All of these organizations, the big, old, established organizations, have been desperately trying to transform in order to compete with the digital natives. Just wait until they have to compete with the AI natives.
Yes. I was just involved in another conversation, foreshadowing of an upcoming episode. The situational awareness AI paper that came out, where I forget the author's name, he talked about drop-in remote agents, which I was like, It's kind of blew my mind. Evan, I'm actually going to take a moment to quote you back to yourself, because the last time we talked, I actually wrote down one of the things you said, and I have keep it on a post-it here on my desk. When we talked about leaders, you mentioned something the last time we chatted with that I want to throw this out to the audience and have them keep this in mind. And the exact term that you used was the political cost of change. And it's something that I keep going back to when I have a quiet moment. And I'm not very quiet, man. There's like 6 songs, 3 voices in this head. They're always talking. Somebody wants pizza. It's a disaster. But I think about when I'm observing a leader who's trying to do something, and I will ask myself, well, why aren't they doing the thing that I know that they know is the right thing to do? And a lot of times it comes back to that political cost of change, where you can't change, you can't steer the aircraft. Aircraft carriers don't do donuts. They're not a Honda Civic. And to your point, these big organizations, I mean, I've always worked in giant legacy systems, insurance, telcos, banking, finance. These are big storied institutions that you don't change on a dime. You don't. So I guess I wanted to give you credit for this quote that everybody's heard me use a bazillion times, so I owe Evan money. But also I would throw this out to our listeners to think about this when you're getting frustrated, when you're looking at a manager or a leader, and you're saying to yourself, why aren't they doing the thing that I know they should be doing? And a lot of times it's the cost of change is maybe more than some people are willing to suffer. And you know what? I can't.
That's it.
I can't blame them at all. Can't blame them at all.
So I will add to that just briefly. So this idea emerged out of a conversation in one of the Agile 2022, one year, actually, I don't, one of the years at that conference, I was talking to a friend of mine, Nadezhda, and we were talking about human systems and human dynamics. And she said something which I completely misheard. And I love what my mishearing I really like, which is politics is the currency of human systems. If we talk about reducing the cost of change, which is like, and we often talk about the financial cost, but if you can't reduce the political cost of change, which is what you're talking about, then change will never occur. It doesn't matter how easy it is. It doesn't matter how cheap it is. One of the challenges that we have as an organization. So one of our primary, in fact, we're a membership organization, but our primary offerings from a product standpoint is research, whether it's commissioned research or whether it's bespoke, or sorry, whether it's specific like productized research. But when we're talking business agility, we need to understand the system. For me to know how effective your organization is from an agility standpoint, I need to know how quickly can you fund work dynamically? Can you move funds to where they need to be? I need to know, can you reorganize structures fluidly? Can you redeploy people to where they need to be without a massive restructure, without disruption? I need to know whether you can act as one. Do you have alignment and unity, collaboration, commonality of purpose across the organization? Do you have your 10,000 employees all working towards a singular vision? Now, the problem with doing a study like that is I need to understand a dozen different business functions, which means we need to interview or survey participants from HR, from finance, from operations, from sales, from marketing. And so we have a product called the Business Agility Profile, which is a behavioral study of an organization. And it is it's a powerful tool. Organizations that do it, always love it. They get some really, really good insights out of it. The problem is that even though it is cheap as chips, very cost effective. I don't know if cheaps and chips translates outside Australia, but it's very, very cost effective. But the issue we've always had in selling this product, selling this research product, is the political cost of it. Right? It costs next to nothing in the scheme of things to run this study. Right? But in order to do it, requires someone who's got enough political will to go to the head of finance and say, we need 5 of your staff to fill in this survey. To go to the head of HR and say, we need 5 of your staff to fill in this survey. to go to the sales managers and say, can we get some salespeople to fill in the survey, individuals and leaders? And to go to the executives and say, of this executive leadership team, we need 3, 4, 5, all of you if you can, but a couple of you, we need you to fill in the survey. And so we've designed a simpler version of the profile that's designed for like the friends and family. You don't have to spend political capital in order to actually do this one. It just takes like 20 people from whoever you can get. But to do a proper behavioral evaluation of an organization, to get that statistical credibility, right, to get that confidence in those, that we're getting that set of behaviors from across the organization, it requires somebody with that political will. And this is just an example of something that is very simple, only takes a couple of weeks. Actually, it doesn't even take that. It takes 2 weeks of like, the survey's open for 2 weeks. So it takes nothing. It costs next to nothing. And yet it is very difficult to sell because of that political cost.
Right.
It's frustrating because, like, as change agents, like, we go to organizations and we can see that potential. We can see, if only. And I remember very naive Evan, young Evan, fresh in my career, I would say stupid things like, "Oh, I don't engage with organizational politics. I'm above that." As if somehow those politics were dirty. And I'm not talking about toxic politics. I'm not talking about toxic organizations. That's different. That's bad. Right? But those politics is the informal networks.
Yes.
It's the goodwill. It is the sphere of influence that you have. And it took me embarrassingly longer than I care to admit to realize that that's how work got done. And only once I realized that you had to reduce that political cost of change, did I realize that the only way we're going to make a difference in the context of business agility is if we are playing that political game, if we are engaging, meeting people where they are, if we are engaging with them with respect, with goodwill, right? But respecting the informal networks that exist across the organization. It's the only way change happens. Sorry, I'm ranting again.
No, that's perfect. And we're coming up on time, so I don't even want to take away from that closeout. But I want to ask Evan, if people want more information, they want to maybe reach out to you, they want to follow up with the Business Agility Institute, maybe look at some of the work you're doing, maybe engage your organization themselves. Where do they go? How do they find you?
So best place, so businessagility.institute. You're welcome to email us, hello@businessagility.institute. Look me up on LinkedIn, connect with Laura Powers if you want. She's an amazing person with some great insights. I would ask, if you do connect with me on LinkedIn, do me a favor and just send me a message saying where you heard me, so that I don't just think you're some random stranger trying to slide into my DMs.
All right. So on behalf of Evan and myself, I want to thank everyone for tuning in once again, listening. On behalf of all of our listeners, Evan, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy morning to come chat with us. You guys know the deal. You all know the deal. Find us on our Discord server. We had a vibrant conversation going the other day. All your Agile, Scrum, whatever needs. Shout out to Krebs and Machine Man Records for our outro music free of charge. We do have a Patreon to offset production costs. If you want to chip in, it's great. You'll get a surprise package from me. Evan, I need your address. I'll send you a pair of socks, some stickers, and some keychains. But once again, want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening. Find you next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern with our new episode. This is Jay saying cheers.